Within the last hour, news has come out that Joe Biden has for the first time approved Ukraine's use of US-supplied long-range missiles to strike deep into Russian territory. Ukraine finds itself at the intersection of unprecedented military developments, strategic challenges following a significant shift in US policy. And this move signals a departure from the previous restrictions that tried to avoid direct provocation that could escalate into a larger conflict involving NATO. And the authorization comes as President-elect Donald Trump's impending administration has pledged a different approach, aiming for a swift resolution to the war and expressing skepticism about sustained American support for Ukraine. And the policy shift reflects Ukraine's persistent calls for advanced weaponry capable of reaching strategic targets in Russia, which they argue is essential to counteract persistent Russian assaults on Ukrainian cities and infrastructure. The use of the Army tactical missile system, ATACMS, which can reach up to 190 miles, is an escalation aimed at disrupting Russian logistics and operational hubs deep behind the front lines. And the approval follows months of debate among NATO allies, intense pressure from President Zelensky, who maintained that limiting Ukraine's strike capability was undermining its defensive efforts. And this development has been met with sharp warnings from the Kremlin. President Putin, who previously labelled the provision of long-range weaponry as tantamount to an act of war, has reiterated that any escalation perceived as direct NATO involvement would prompt significant Russian responses. And the rhetoric of deterrence has now merged with a reality that complicates the conflict's trajectory, as evidenced by Russia's massive retaliatory strike last night. This attack, one of the most severe in months, targeted Russian cities like Kyiv, Odessa, civilian infrastructure, resulting in extensive damage, power outages, civilian casualties. The intensity of the attack underscores a grim reality. Russia's capacity to deliver devastating blows remains formidable, even as it grapples with its own logistical and military strains. Compounding these complexities is North Korea's recent involvement in the conflict, with reports of up to 12,000 troops deployed to Russia's northern border regions. And this development reflects a deepening alliance that aims to bolster Russia's faltering manpower, replenish its military supplies, further internationalizing the conflict and raising concerns about regional security. In Kyiv, the strikes plunge parts of the city into darkness, targeting power generation factories, power plants, and civilian buildings, and illustrating Russia's strategy of using winter conditions as leverage against Ukraine's resilience. Winter has always been a weapon in Russia's arsenal. The Russian TV people constantly remind us. President Zelensky has acknowledged Ukraine's air defences, which, though effective, were stretched to the limit by this coordinated assault involving an estimated 120 missiles, some of them enormous, and 90 drones. And the backdrop to these events is an international chessboard in flux. While the Biden administration's policy shift aligns with a strategy of fortifying Ukraine's position before a possible change in US policy under President Trump, it poses risks. Trump's proposed peace initiative, likely involving significant territorial concessions, has raised alarms among Ukraine's allies, who fear that such a resolution would embolden Russia and compromise Ukraine's sovereignty, perhaps leading to a ceasefire during which Russia can rearm and then re-attack in a few years' time. As the G7 reiterates its commitment to imposing severe consequences on Russia, as the G20 gets ready to meet, the global stakes are high. The approval of long-range missile use is a testament to the US's enduring, if evolving, support for Ukraine, but it also invites heightened risks of miscalculation. The war's trajectory remains uncertain, shaped by a confluence of strategic gambits, international partnerships, and the fluctuating resolve of leaders on both sides of the Atlantic. The coming weeks will be critical in determining whether these escalations spiral further or yield a precarious pathway towards uncertain resolution.